Hello and welcome again to The Election Explained, a podcast mini-series from Edge Hill University all about the general election 2024. I'm Gareth Roberts, the host, and again I am joined by a panel of experts. I've got...
So my name's Paula Keaveney, I'm Senior Lecturer in Politics at Edge Hill University.
Brilliant. And
I'm Dr Ben Williams. I'm an Associate Tutor in Politics and Social Science here at the university as well.
Excellent. OK, so if you missed our first episode, it was all about the who, the what, the where, the when, the why and how of voting in the election. That's already out there, so go and find that one. There are a series of articles in the news section on the Edge Hill website, so check that out as well. This time around, we're going to get stuck into a few issues around the election, around politics, as well as some of the questions we've had submitted to us by staff and students here at Edge Hill. Now, we're hoping much of our audience for this show will be young voters, perhaps people voting for the first time. And in the UK parliamentary elections, the voting age is currently 18 years old. However, many, including the National Union of Students, believe it's time to lower that age to 16. Now, the NUS have launched a petition, and they say as follows. They say we should be doing all we can to encourage young people to engage in voting and democracy. This starts by ending the postcode lottery of voting in the UK. Sign our petition to call on the next government to lower the voting age to 16. Now, the Labour Party too have been hinting that this may well be something they will do. Paula, first off, explain what the NUS is referencing in terms of postcode lottery.
Yeah, so it's not really a postcode lottery, but what they're referring to is that in Scotland, for some elections, you can vote at 16. Of course, in Scotland, for the general election, the UK rules apply and everyone's voting at 18. So that's what they're referring to, the fact that for some elections, in some parts of the country, the voting age is different.
Wales as well, I believe, for some elections.
So, and the line of progress is towards lowering the voting age generally. And this is a campaign that has been going for really, I remember this campaign from when I was young. This is a campaign that has been going for quite some time, and as it goes on, it wins more and more support across the parties. There are people in just about every party that now support lowering the voting age. It
does, however, seem something to be associated with Labour at this stage, Ben, and you know it's been reported that Labour could give 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote in its first year. In fact, it's been reported that it could be ushered through really quickly if they get into power. What are your thoughts on it?
In some ways, it's quite a radical position for Labour. They've been accused of, sort of sitting on the fence on lots of issues and not want to rock the vote. This is an issue that seems to have, divided opinion, and it has some supporters and it has some opponents. And I know there are opponents within the Conservative Party and in some parts of the media who think it's a bad idea and have attacked Labour for it because they've argued that, younger people of that age aren't ready to vote. But I suppose it's quite a bold policy in many respects. And if Labour do get into power and they bring it in, they'll obviously be hoping that, younger people will become more engaged and voting amongst younger people will possibly, be at a higher level because of it.
Perhaps not surprisingly, for people who follow the media and understand the media, I would say. The Telegraph have said that this is not a popular idea, and I've ran an article talking about lots of people who were against the idea, including the Whitby women.
Yes, so there will be people who were against this, and there will be quite a lively debate about it. There have been several attempts already to get the law changed by individual MPs taking bits of legislation into the Commons, but these are always doomed because they don't have enough time to go through the process that we need. But we can look at other countries and say, well, does the sky fall in if 16-year-olds vote? So Austria, 16-year-olds can vote. In Greece, the age is 17. So there are clearly some places where young people are considered mature enough to vote. And for those people who say young people aren't ready, that they're not taught about this enough, that they wouldn't know what to do, if the voting age was lowered, you can guarantee that there would be an effort to make sure young people were better educated, and there would be an effort by parties to introduce their policies to young people.
That seems to be really key, Ben, and it's something that's been a bee in my bonnet over the years. I think back to my school days, which are quite a long way away now, but you know, we're speaking, we're at an educational institution right now. Do you think there's enough, you know, our youngsters, our people 16 and below, are they politically aware enough? Are they taught enough about the system and how it all works?
I think there are obviously always younger people who are very well educated on these issues and very attuned to it all. But I think in general, probably not. I know in recent years the government have brought in citizenship as a subject area. I'm not quite sure it took off in the way that they wanted it to. And that was an attempt, obviously, to get younger people more engaged in politics. I think they definitely have to do more, even if votes at 16 are not immediately happening, just to make people a bit more educated at that level. So I think certainly, whether it's votes for 16 imminently or somewhere further down the line, I do think there has to be more particular educational focus for the people, young people in the educational system, so that when they come to vote, they use their vote in a way based on knowledge and information.
Yeah. Now, in the past, Paula, Labour lowered the voting age from 21 to 16 in 1969. And then the idea to lower it again has been rejected by Parliament twice, 1999 and 2005. What do you remember about those previous attempts?
So when the voting age was lowered initially, people thought this is going to help the Labour Party, and actually it didn't. You know, so the first lesson there is we can't draw massive conclusions about how all young people are likely to vote. But the problem with the previous attempts is that if you don't have the parliamentary time, and if you haven't already built up the sort of reservoir of support, you are not going to get something through Parliament. So for this to happen, it does really need the government of the day to be supporting it and giving it time in the legislative programme. Now, one of the issues here is there are so many things you can be doing in the Commons. Would you prioritise this? And I think Labour will come under attack if the first thing they do is this, because people will say, what about crime? What about education? What about health? So it can never be the most important thing, but the government of the day does need to carve out time for this.
As I said before, we suspect, we hope that we are attracting a fairly young audience in all this. So I asked this question with them in mind. Some of the comments around it, I would suggest are fairly disparaging of the youth, if you like to use that umbrella term, because, you know, the Conservative Bob Seeley has said perhaps Labour think younger voters will be easier to pull the wool over than older folks with a bit of life experience. And Sir Ian Duncan Smith has accused Keir Starmer of virtue signalling over this issue and says this is a gimmick done by those who think their party is more likely to get the vote. That doesn't really seem to consider that, you know, as you said before, there are a lot of people who are politically engaged and, you know, you can do a lot of other things at 16. Why not vote?
No, that's exactly it. There are other things you can do at 16. And I think, as Paul has sort of suggested, there's a bit of defeatism maybe here from the Conservatives, because it doesn't automatically mean, I think the Conservatives seem to be suggesting, oh, this is just going to bring a deluge of Labour voters into the system. There's nothing automatic that younger people are en masse going to vote Labour or not vote Conservative. OK, recent polling has suggested that has been the case, but it's quite a recent polarisation based on age. And really, the Conservatives who are opposing this really should be reacting to it and saying there are potential voters here for us if we engage with them, but to dismiss them all as a kind of a left-wing Labour-led conspiracy is not really the best way of dealing with this if and when it's likely to happen. And again, it slightly undermines the way young people think. They're not just one huge block, they're individuals, they'll have opinions, and there will be Conservative-inclined voters in that block of young people as well.
I wanted to ask you about another idea, something else I've seen people discussing, Paula, whether we should follow at any point what they do in Australia and make voting compulsory. So,
in Australia, it's compulsory to go and vote. You can spoil your ballot paper. You can write none of the above. So it doesn't mean you have to vote for one of the candidates, but you have to rock up and vote. Got to say, my feeling is against this because although I'm very keen that people vote, I want people to want to vote. You know, I don't want to be compelling people to visit a particular building on a particular day just for the sake of it. So I would tend to be against that.
Okay. Well, those that caught the first episode of the Election Explained will know that we have a high-tech sweet jar full of questions from our staff and from our students. So we're going to return to that now. Get a few more questions out. Ben, do you want to go first this time?
So, over there. That's what this one says. Hope we can answer it. How do political parties get my details, for example, to call me or knock on my door? I mean, my understanding of this from sort of past experiences, I mean, they obviously they have electoral registers, so they'll have your name on an electoral register. That used to be a paper version, but I imagine now it's probably all electronic. Also, they may have past canvass information, so you may, even if you don't remember, have been canvassed, called on, telephoned in the past, even sent things via email or traditional post. And parties will normally have some kind of database that they're working from. So they do have some valid information that is accessible to make contact with you, and how you react to that, whether you want to engage or you want to shut the door in the face, is entirely up to you as a voter.
As a little follow-up to that question, Paula, where do you think we're at now in terms of traditional ways of encouraging people to vote and the more modern digital? So obviously, you know, we heard Dominic Cummings talk about how he felt the Conservatives won in the past, and it was using data, using the internet, using social media, etc., etc. We're obviously seeing a lot of that during this campaign, but equally, there are still people knocking on doors.
Yeah, so parties will use a range of these things, and the one that works very much depends on the voter. So the important thing for parties is to get information about who are going to support you, who are the people who are persuadable to support you, and who are the people that hate you, that will never vote for you in a million years. And your task is to persuade the supporters to turn out and vote, to persuade the persuadable people to come over to you and turn out and vote, and to do nothing with the people that hate you. So if you, on polling day, you see people knocking on people's doors asking them to go and vote, and there's two people from two different parties, if things have worked, they should be knocking at different doors, because their data should be such that they know who their supporters are. Where you've got a problem with the data is if you both walk up the same door, both knock on the same door. And sometimes I personally feel that the personal touch, the turning up on the door, is the best. You know, face-to-face conversation, I think, is best, but it's very labour-intensive, which is why a lot of it's done by phone, by email, by messaging on social media. But this is all about data. If you don't have the data in the first place, you can't possibly target your voters to go out and vote.
Okay, your turn.
Okay. I hope you didn't force that card on me, because this one was actually at the very top. So, how do I find out who is running for MP in my area? So, a very easy way to do this, if you haven't had a leaflet through your door from every candidate, if you go to an organisation called Democracy Club, if you Google it, use any other search engine, there will be a bit of that website that says, who can I vote for? Click on that, type in your postcode. It will give you the name of your constituency and the full list of candidates, and maybe a little bit of information about them. So that is the fail-safe way. Not every candidate will have the resources to deliver a leaflet to your house. So the fail-safe way is the Democracy Club.
Okay. Definitive. Good answer. Ben, another go?
Another one. Quick look at this. What happens at an election count and who can attend? Okay, well, me and Paul have both been to quite a few of these in the time. So what basically happens is, as the name suggests, they count the votes. The votes are brought in these large sort of steel boxes that have been secured for obviously security reasons, so no one can tamper with them. There is a process initially where they actually numerically count the number of votes, and then at a later stage, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Paula, they then split them into obviously party piles. It is a physical kind of manual job. It's not electronic. It's done with actual pieces of paper and cards. And then obviously when you are there, you do get an idea of how the result is going, because you can see piles building up. And obviously the pile with the biggest number is the likely winner. Sometimes when it's very close, you know, there are recounts. There are, you know, checks on piles, etc. In terms of who can attend, again, this may change, but it's usually the candidate's partner or some family, and then they're usually allowed the agent, who's the person who's their helper in the party, and then normally a number of party workers can go. I'm not quite sure the actual numbers of that, but you can normally take a cluster of people with you, obviously to support you at the count and to help you actually monitor the count, to check it's all going as it should be.
And one of the reasons we're doing all this, Paula, is obviously to try and get people engaged with politics. We said before, might be people voting for the first time and things like that. One thing I actively enjoy is the stage where the results are coming through. You can sit down, you can watch it on television. You have all these graphics coming up showing you the whole country. And all that bit's exciting, isn't it?
It is exciting. It is exciting. I mean, for people at the count, it can be exciting, but it can also be very tiring because these are often running into the early hours of the morning, and you know, many of those candidates and workers are exhausted. And of course, there's a big media presence at some counts. Not everybody is friendly with each other because obviously you've got rival camps there, but it is exciting. And on election night, running into the morning, you can pretty soon see a trend. There are some counts that declare the result very early in the night, and you can see the percentage change, and you can see a trend coming through as the night goes on. But when I hear that music at the beginning of the election programme, even though I've seen loads of these and I'm an old hack, when I hear that music, it is very exciting. It's like, here we go then. These days, we also have an exit poll immediately at the beginning, which can be surprising. And then you're then saying, I'm going to watch to see if that exit poll's accurate.
Is there an unofficial competition going on to be the first authority to say we counted them first?
Yeah, so there are some authorities that put extra resource in to working a very slick count, and Sunderland is the place. So if you watch Sunderland on the television, they're not just bringing the ballot boxes in, they're running, they have a relay. It's all worked out because this guarantees for them live television, where they probably wouldn't get it otherwise. So they get to put their banners up and they get recognised in a way that they wouldn't normally. But, you know, if you're in a count where there's likely to be a recount, it's very close, that result's going to be a bit slow. Because, you know, asking for a recount could add an hour or 2 hours on, and people are going to be very, very, very careful about everything.
Excellent. Go on, you'll go.
Okay. Taking my time, I know, and the winner is, how old do you have to be to stand as an election candidate? Are there any other criteria? So you have to be 18. That doesn't necessarily mean there are a lot of 18-year-olds, but you have to be 18. You also have to get nomination papers filled in, so that means you need to get some people to sign. If you're standing for a party, an official for the party has to sign to say you are the official candidate. If you don't get that, you can't use that party's name. Other criteria, you can't stand in a general election if you are a member of the House of Lords. Because, you know, the members of the House of Lords don't get to vote in a general election, and they don't get to be candidates either because they are already in the other House of Parliament. And, you know, if you are in prison, you can't stand either. Of course, that didn't used to be the case. And you may remember during the Troubles, there were hunger strikes in a prison in Northern Ireland, and a guy called Bobby Sands was in prison and at the same time was a candidate in a by-election which he won. And as a result of that, the law was changed.
Okay. And we heard about people losing the deposit. What's that?
Yeah, so to stand in a general election, you have to pay a deposit. That's like saying, I am serious. And if you don't reach 5% of the vote, that deposit is retained. So this is really about preventing there being, you know, hundreds of non-serious candidates. It's establishing some sort of a, you know, some sort of a limit. So if there is a recount at a count, it could be for one of two reasons. First reason is the final result's really close and they're checking to see who's won. Second reason is someone is very close to losing their deposit and they've asked for a recount just to see whether they can get over that 5% barrier. So if you hear about a recount, it doesn't necessarily mean that the result's close. It could be a deposit count.
Ben.
Another one, right, here we go. Let's see this one. Do I have to tell people how I vote, or can I keep it private? Well, the simple answer to that is no, it is a private thing between you and the ballot box, and that's entirely up to the person involved. You might want to tell your family, you might want to tell your friends how you voted. You do hear of people saying, husbands and wives, saying that they've been married for X amount of years and they still don't know how each other vote because they don't tell each other. So it's an entirely private thing. Paula may correct me on this. I believe that, you know, because I was once asked for an exit poll. You talk about exit polls. If you are walking into the polling station, I believe it is an offence if someone apprehends you and asks you how you vote. But when you leave, you can be asked. And I was once asked with these exit polls that do happen. They do ask people. And I was once asked as I left how I'd voted. And I told them, but I could have not told them if I wanted to. And I'm assuming that the data I told them then went to the exit poll.
There you go. OK.
Of course, interestingly, exit polls will be less reliable now. The more people vote by post, the less easy it is to do those sort of exit polls. So pollsters will probably be thinking of ways around that, you know, because you can't find me after I've filled in my ballot paper because you don't know where I am.
Yeah.
So, politicians sling mud at other parties. Has it always been like this, and does it damage the reputation of politics? Well, yes, it has actually always been like this. And in fact, you know, in the old days when we didn't have the full franchise and elections took place over a number of days, there were often riots with candidates literally flinging mud at each other and supporters literally fighting in the streets. So, yes, this is not a new thing. And perhaps we think it is because we are more aware of the verbal attacks. So, you know, these are everywhere, aren't they? Does it damage the reputation of politics? Possibly. And the reason I'm saying possibly is that when there is an ideological clash, we want people to argue. You know, we want, if I believe that everything should be nationalised and Ben believes everything should be privatised, we want that argued out. We don't want us to very politely say, oh, well, you believe that, then I believe this, end of. So we expect some intensity. So that's the good type of debate. The bad type of debate is, you know, you're horrible, no, you're horrible. No, you're awful, no, you're awful, because that doesn't get us anywhere. As far as the reputation of politics, I think this is sad, but it is quite low now. There was a recent poll which showed that people's trust is lower than ever before. Now, whether there's a real reason for that is another question. But, no, attacks have always been with us, and they were a lot more physical in the days of Charles Dickens and people like that.
OK, well, I was feeling left out, Ben, from not getting to dip into the sweet jar and pick one out, so I picked one out while Paula was talking for you.
OK, all right.
And the question I pulled out is, what is a bellwether seat and where does it get its name from?
Oh, well, I could probably answer the first part of it. The second one, I'm not so sure. So my understanding of bellwether seat is kind of like a marginal seat, but I think a bellwether seat tends to be won by the party that wins the election. So there are certain seats all over the country which will, by their nature, be marginal with close results, and they tend to be won by whoever wins the election, basically. I'm trying to think of there's a couple of seats in Bolton, I think not a million miles from here, where whoever wins the certain seats in Bolton wins the election. Chorley, I think, is another one. So, yeah, so it's like an indicator of who's going to win the election. And basically, if you win those seats, you're going to win the election, often with a fairly handsome majority. The actual origin of the name Bellwether, though, I'm not actually 100% sure, so I don't know whether Paula knows that, or you can tell me. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'd have to guess. I'm guessing it's a bell swinging in the wind, you know. But you know, Ben's right. These are seats that the media look at because in the past they've always gone to the side of the party that ends up winning. So, you know, places like Nuneaton are often quoted. When I was younger, Basildon was the one that was like constantly being quoted. But they don't necessarily always stay the same because when boundaries change, obviously the thing that makes it a bellwether may shift.
And sometimes there's demographic change as well. So what was once a marginal seat, because over the years has changed and the people in it shifts. But there are some that they regularly cite as key seats to watch, basically. Brilliant
stuff from our experts. Hope you're enjoying this mini-series of podcasts, The Election Explained. As I've said a couple of times already, there are also articles on Edge Hill's website, so check those out too. And look out for the final third episode of The Election Explained. We're going to be talking a little bit about what we've seen in the media so far in the next episode. Hopefully you're enjoying this series. Look out for the next one. And thanks to everyone for this one.